Before we begin, if you're listening to this alone at night, you're exactly where you should be. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more true horror stories, disturbing encounters, and unexplained events uploaded every day. Now lock your doors, turn off the lights, and let's get into tonight's stories. Every city bus driver eventually works the overnight shift. The pay is better, the roads are quieter, but the passengers are different. Hospital workers, night security guards, people heading home after bars close. Most are exhausted. Some are unpredictable. You learn to expect strange conversations after midnight. What you don't expect is someone boarding your bus without ever appearing at the stop. That's exactly what happened on my third week driving the night route. And by sunrise, I wasn't sure whether I'd transported a passenger or something that had simply been waiting for a ride. My name is Marcus. I drove city transit buses in a mid-sized city outside Cleveland. Most new drivers started on evening routes before earning daytime seniority. I didn't mind. Traffic was lighter. Schedules were easier to maintain. The only downside was the final run of the night. Route 18, a 40-minute loop through the industrial district before returning downtown. Most drivers hated it. They said it felt empty. I thought they were exaggerating. The first several nights were uneventful. A few factory workers, hospital staff, an occasional college student. Nothing memorable. Then, on a rainy Tuesday, I reached the stop at Mercer Street. Nobody was waiting. I checked both mirrors. The sidewalk was empty. I closed the doors and pulled away. The fare box chimed. Someone had just paid. I looked in the interior mirror. A man wearing a dark overcoat sat halfway down the aisle, head lowered, hands folded neatly across a small briefcase. I slammed the brakes. The bus wasn't moving fast enough to throw anyone. I was certain no one had boarded. The passengers already on board looked irritated. One woman asked, "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Did anyone just get on?" She frowned. "I don't think so." I checked the security monitor. The recording showed the front doors opening. No one stepping inside. Then, the fare box activated by itself. When the doors closed, the man was already sitting in seat 11. I convinced myself the camera had glitched. The rest of the route remained quiet. Nobody spoke to the man. He never looked up. Every few minutes, I checked the mirror. Same posture, same seat, not moving. Approaching the downtown terminal, I announced, "Last stop." Passengers stood, collected bags, exited normally. The man remained seated. I walked halfway down the aisle. "Sir?" No response. When I reached seat 11, it was empty. The seat cushion was warm. The briefcase was gone. Every window remained closed. The rear doors had never opened. The next evening, I mentioned it to another driver. He smiled uneasily. "What seat?" 11. His smile disappeared. He quietly said, "If he ever moves to the front, end your shift." I laughed. He didn't. Over the next week, the man appeared 3 more times. Always boarding at Mercer Street. Always after I'd already checked the stop. Always sitting in seat 11. Always disappearing before the final inspection. None of the regular passengers acknowledged him. At least, not until one elderly woman boarded late one night. She stopped beside seat 11, looked directly at the man, then quietly asked, "You're still riding?" He slowly nodded. Without lifting his head, the woman immediately walked to the very back of the bus. She never looked towards seat 11 again. At the end of that route, I asked her whether she knew him. She looked genuinely confused. "Knew who?" "The man in the coat." Her expression changed. Very quietly she asked, "What seat?" 11. She exited without answering. A few nights later, heavy fog rolled into the city. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. I nearly skipped Mercer Street altogether. At the last second, I stopped anyway. The sidewalk was empty, exactly as before. The fare box chimed. I didn't look immediately. I already knew what I'd see. Seat 11. Dark overcoat. Briefcase. Head lowered. Halfway through the route, the interior lights flickered. When they came back, the man had moved. Seat 9. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. At the next stop, he sat in seat 7. No one walked past him. No one noticed him moving. He simply appeared closer. By the time we reached downtown, He occupied seat 3, directly behind me. I didn't turn around. The radio crackled. Dispatch asked for a routine status check. Before I answered, another voice came through. Quiet. Calm. Next stop. Dispatch immediately asked. Marcus? Did you say something? I hadn't. We arrived at the terminal. Every passenger exited. I remained seated, too afraid to look behind me. Finally, I stood, turned around. Every seat was empty, except seat 1, directly behind the driver's barrier. The briefcase rested alone on the cushion. I slowly reached toward it. The bus doors suddenly opened by themselves. A cold gust of air swept through the aisle. The briefcase disappeared. The doors closed again. The following morning, I asked maintenance to review the security footage. Every recording froze whenever the camera pointed toward seat 11, then resumed a few seconds later. No passenger ever appeared entering or leaving. Several months passed. I transferred to a daytime route. Mercer Street became someone else's stop. One evening, I ran into the driver who replaced me. He looked exhausted. Before I could say hello, he asked, "Did your passenger ever make it to seat 1?" I never answered. I didn't need to. His expression told me everything. I still ride city buses occasionally when my truck's in the shop. Whenever I board after dark, I always check one seat before sitting down. Seat 11. Because if someone wearing a dark overcoat is already there, I get off at the next stop, no matter where I am. Because every night, that passenger gets 2 seats closer to the driver. And one day, there won't be any seats left. Every transit driver hears the same instruction before every shift. Never leave a passenger on the bus. At the end of the route, you park. Walk from the driver's seat to the very back. Check every row. Wake up anyone who's sleeping. Only then can you pull into the garage. It's a simple rule. One night, I followed it perfectly. I checked every seat, every corner, every window. The bus was completely empty. Then someone rang the stop request bell. From the very last row. My name is Anthony. I drove the final Route 22 every night through the south side of Milwaukee. By the time my last trip began, most people in the city were already asleep. The passengers who remained were usually familiar faces. Hospital workers, janitors, security guards, a few college students trying to get home before sunrise. You learn their routines after a while. Who gets off where? Who always sits in the front? Who sleeps through their stop? One passenger never seemed to get off at all. It started with a man wearing a dark blue hoodie. Nothing unusual about him. He boarded near the university, paid in cash, never spoke, always walked directly to the last row. Left side, window seat. The first night, I assumed he'd fallen asleep. At the final terminal, I performed my required inspection. The seat was empty. No problem. The next night, the exact same thing happened. Same stop, same hoodie, same last row seat, same disappearance before inspection. After about a week, I mentioned him to another driver. He immediately asked, "Left side?" I nodded. He looked away, then quietly said, "Don't wait for him to get off." I laughed. "What do you mean? Just finish your route." He refused to explain. One rainy evening, my final run was almost empty. Only 3 passengers remained. An elderly woman near the front, a man listening to music halfway back, and the passenger in the blue hoodie. Last row. Exactly as always. The elderly woman requested her stop. As she exited, she paused beside my window. Without looking back, she quietly said, "He's still riding?" Before I could answer, she walked away. Halfway to the terminal, the man listening to music stood up. As he walked toward the front, he glanced toward the last row. His expression changed immediately. He hurried off the bus without saying a word. That left only the man in the hoodie. The terminal sat at the end of a long industrial street. No houses, no businesses, just empty warehouses and the transit turnaround. I parked, set the brake, opened the doors. Last stop. Silence. The passenger didn't move. I waited a full minute. Still nothing. Company policy required me to inspect the bus. I grabbed my flashlight and walked down the aisle. Every row, empty. When I reached the back, the last seat was vacant. No hoodie, no backpack, no passenger. I sighed. Same thing again. Then, ding. The stop request bell sounded. I froze. The indicator above the windshield lit up. Stop requested. I slowly looked behind me. The bus was empty. I reset the system from the driver's console. The light disappeared. I started the engine. Ding. The light came back. This time, the sound didn't come from the ceiling. It came from the last row, exactly where the passenger always sat. I shut the engine off. Walked back again. Nothing. As I reached the rear emergency exit, I noticed something I'd never seen before. The window was fogged over. From the inside, someone slowly traced a single word with a finger. Wait. The letters remained for several seconds, then faded. I left the bus immediately. Maintenance searched it before it entered the garage. Nothing unusual. No fingerprints. No signs of anyone hiding. The next night, I was assigned a different bus. Same route. Same schedule. I almost relaxed. Until the passenger in the blue hoodie boarded again. Same stop. Same cash fare. Same last row seat. This time, I watched him through the interior mirror almost the entire trip. He never moved. Never looked up. Never spoke. As we approached the terminal, the radio crackled. Dispatch called my unit number. Before I answered, another voice quietly interrupted. One more stop. Dispatch immediately asked, "Anthony? What was that?" I hadn't spoken. There were no scheduled stops after the terminal. I ignored the radio and pulled into the turnaround. Opened the doors. Announced the final stop. The passenger stood. For the first time, he walked slowly toward the front. Every step echoed through the empty bus. As he passed my seat, he stopped. Without looking at me, he quietly said, "Wrong driver." Then he stepped off the bus. I immediately looked through the windshield. The street outside was completely empty. No one walking away. No one crossing the road. Nothing. I reviewed the security cameras the following morning. The footage showed the passenger boarding, walking toward the back, sitting down, everything normal. At the terminal, he stood, walked forward, reached the front door. Then, the video skipped exactly 2 frames. When it resumed, the front door was still closed. The passenger was gone. Several weeks later, I transferred to a daytime route. Night driving no longer appealed to me. A few months after that, I met the driver who'd taken over Route 22. We were talking in the employee lounge when he casually asked, "How long did it take before you started talking?" I stared at him. "What?" "The last passenger." I didn't answer. He smiled nervously. "I guess it finally reached the front. I've driven thousands of passengers across the city. Most faces disappear from memory after a few weeks. But not his. Whenever I ride a bus after dark, I never sit near the back anymore. Because if the stop request bell rings, and no one gets up, there's a chance the final passenger still hasn't reached the end of his route." Every bus route has an end. The last stop, the last passenger, the last entry in the driver's log. When the shift is over, you return the bus to the depot. Fill out the inspection report. Hand the keys to dispatch. Simple. Routine. Except one night, my route didn't end where it was supposed to. According to my schedule, I reached the final stop at 2:35 a.m. According to the bus GPS, I never stopped driving. It showed my bus moving for nearly 3 more hours on roads that don't exist. My name is Jason. I drove public transit buses for a city outside Sacramento. Night routes were always assigned to the newer drivers. Less traffic, fewer passengers, more time alone. Most shifts were predictable. By midnight, you recognized almost everyone boarding the bus. Security guards, warehouse workers, hospital staff. The city slowly emptied. My final run, every Friday, was Route 41. One long loop through the industrial district before returning to the depot. Nothing unusual. Until one foggy night. The route had been quiet. Only 7 passengers rode the entire loop. By the time I reached the second to last stop, everyone had already gotten off. The bus was empty. I checked the interior mirror twice to be sure. The last scheduled stop sat beside an abandoned freight yard. No one was waiting. No one requested the stop. I opened the doors anyway. Waited 10 seconds. Closed them. Then headed toward the depot. Halfway there, The destination sign above my windshield changed by itself. Normally it displayed, "Not in service." Instead, bright amber letters scrolled across the display. "End of the line." I reached for the control panel. The buttons wouldn't respond. Then, the bus radio crackled. "Not dispatch. Not another driver. Just one sentence. Continue to the final stop." I answered immediately. "This is bus 41. Who's transmitting?" "Only static." The GPS suddenly recalculated. A new route appeared. Not to the depot. To an address I had never seen. No street name. No neighborhood. Only final terminal. I ignored it and continued toward the garage. At the next intersection, the traffic light remained red. No cross traffic. No pedestrians. Nothing. It never changed. I waited almost 2 minutes. Finally, the GPS spoke. "Turn left." There wasn't a road to the left. Only an old maintenance entrance leading into the freight yard. The barrier gate stood open. I was certain it had always been locked. Curiosity got the better of me. I turned. The pavement narrowed. Old railroad tracks crossed beneath the bus. The city lights disappeared behind thick fog. After several minutes, I noticed another transit bus parked ahead. Same color. Same city logo. Same fleet number as mine. Bus 641. That was impossible. I was driving bus 641. The parked bus looked abandoned. Interior lights glowing. Front door open. Engine off. I stopped beside it. There wasn't anyone inside. Except a driver's logbook resting on the steering wheel. My name was written on the cover. I hadn't left my bus. My own logbook still sat beside me. I opened the abandoned one. Every page had already been completed. My signature appeared at the bottom of each shift report. Every date was blank. The final page contained only one entry. Route completed. Nothing else. The bus behind me suddenly honked. One loud blast. I looked in the mirror. My own bus remained parked exactly where I'd left it. No one sat in the driver's seat. Yet the headlights flashed once. The radio came alive again. "Driver, you're late." The voice sounded calm. Professional. Almost like a dispatcher. Fog rolled across the road. Within seconds, both buses disappeared from view. I couldn't even see my own mirrors. Then, I heard footsteps. Heavy work boots. Walking slowly down the aisle behind me. I checked the interior mirror. Every seat remained empty. The footsteps continued anyway. Closer. One row at a time. I refused to turn around. The stop request bell rang. Once. Then again. Then every stop request cord on the bus activated together. Ding. 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 The indicator panel lit up with every stop number. As if every passenger on the route had requested to get off at once. I threw the transmission into drive and accelerated. The fog suddenly vanished. I found myself parked outside the transit depot entrance. Exactly where I should have been. The GPS returned to normal. The destination sign once again read, "Not in service." The night supervisor walked outside. "You okay? You've been sitting there almost 20 minutes. I looked at the dashboard clock. Only 20 minutes had passed. The GPS report told a different story. According to vehicle tracking, my bus had traveled another 83 miles after finishing Route 41. No roads matched the recorded path. The route simply wandered through blank sections of the city map. Maintenance assumed the GPS had malfunctioned. The tracking unit was replaced. The old data was archived. No one investigated further. A week later, I asked an older mechanic whether he'd ever heard of a place called Final Terminal. He stopped tightening a wheel lug, looked directly at me, then quietly asked, "What fleet number?" 641. He nodded slowly. I thought they'd finally retired that bus. He explained that decades ago, before the depot expanded, an older terminal had stood beyond the freight yard. The city demolished it after opening the new transit center. Every route ended there, until one driver never returned. The fleet number assigned to that bus had been 641. I transferred to daytime service shortly afterward. I've never driven another overnight route. Every now and then, usually just before dawn, I'll be stopped at a traffic light when another city bus passes in the opposite direction. Its destination sign never shows a route number. Never shows out of service. Only 3 words. End of the line. The windows are always dark. The driver's face is impossible to make out. And no matter how closely I look, I never see a single passenger inside. At least, not until the bus passes me. Because every time, just before it disappears into the darkness, every stop request bell inside rings at once, as though an invisible route is finally coming to an end.